Asperger's syndrome, that's what we're talking about right now. This is a condition most of you don't know anything about, but Richard Chandler knows all about it, because he's found his life very, very difficult up to now. He's had to overcome bullying at school. He couldn't understand why he found communicating and socialising with people so difficult. But it all began to make sense when he was just 18?
Yeah, at 18 he was actually diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, and since then he has learned how to cope with the condition and try and make the most of his amazing talents, which we're going to find out about in a moment. Also with us, we've got Caroline Hattersley, who's from the National Autistic Society. And if we can start with you, Caroline, because we've been saying Asperger's, you know, most of us have either never heard of it or we've heard of it and don't really know what it is. What is it?
Well, Asperger's is on the autism spectrum, so it is an autism spectrum condition, and it's very similar in how it presents. The underlying difficulties are the same, difficulties with social interaction, social communication, social imagination. But often people with Asperger don't have as many of the sort of communication and speech difficulties, and they often have a sort of a moderate to high IQ, unlike people with
So when you say the autism spectrum, is that, you know, on a scale of, say, 1 to 10, where would Asperger's be?
It's very hard to say, but I guess it's kind of at what we call the higher functioning end of the spectrum. There are, as I say, there wouldn't be sort of learning difficulties associated with Asperger, although there might be some specific learning difficulties like dyslexia and
let's
things.
hear from Richard about his life, because it's very interesting to talk. I mean, this is in your life. It doesn't prevent you having a life, but it's a fascinating thing how it controls you. And Caroline was talking there about tendencies, autistic tendencies that you may have. What would be happening in your life that will be different than most people? What are your tendencies?
Well, it certainly tends to make me become a lot more obsessed in certain things and have strong interests that a lot of us have.
Like very pernickety on detail.
Yeah, we tend to sort of have particular things that we sort of, whether it be sort of spelling or arithmetic or numbers, or some people are really good at paintings, and so we tend to sort of have specific interests and sort of really draw into those.
Well, that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. You can turn that into a positive. On the downside, where do you feel you're held back in life? Where do you have difficulty?
Well, it's often hard to relate to other people, and in particular, just having a difference. A lot of society tends to be sort of not very receptive to people, and don't celebrate the diversity and sort of the difference that people with Asperger's have.
And at school, that was a problem for you, because kids, as we know, can be very cruel. We all like to be like everybody else. So when did that start? Was that when you were very young? Did you realise that you weren't quite getting on with your classmates? Or?
Well, the bullying problem really started very suddenly when I started secondary school, at sort of the age of 11. And it sort of went on for about 5 years, just before I started sixth form. It was at its worst in sort of the first 3 years of secondary school.
Can you understand that, bullying? The reason I want to ask that is, I've known kids through the years, and there's one young lad I'm thinking about, and he takes everything very, very literally. So if you say to him, "Well, have you got eyes in the back of your head?" and he'll go, "You can't have eyes in the back of your head." Or if you say, "Here comes the paper man," he'll say, "But a man can't be made out of paper." Can you then, you can actually see how he's rationalising that. Can you look back on things that you said or did and understand why people mocked you?
Yeah, I was certainly a lot more like that at that sort of age. I think that certainly in my case, as I've got older, certain things I tend to learn to cope with, and sort of have a sort of a social facade, and so in some ways I suppose I sort of semi-grow out of some areas, but certainly not entirely at all.
But academically, it seemed you did very well at school. I know you're very bright with maths and things, but was the bullying and not being able to socialise with your friends affecting your work as well? So did it become a double kind of problem?
Yeah, it certainly had a very big implication at school. I think one of the problems for me was, and a lot of people with Asperger's syndrome, is that because I had sort of a high IQ, but and was doing sort of moderately well at school, it wasn't seen as a particularly big issue. But if someone was to have sort of an average IQ and sort of was sort of doing really badly at school,
more attention would be made of them.
So
there's a thing that you suffer from, and I want Caroline's opinion on this as well, called sensory overload. Sometimes people have Asperger's have this, and in your situation, if I could paint the picture, if you're in a classroom and there's 30 other people or so in that classroom, what do you hear? What is it like? Why is it different for you than other people?
I think that I pick out sounds, like each individual sound, and I'm thinking about them a lot more intensely. I think it's a bit like if you sort of have a casserole and a dog might sort of be able to identify all the different ingredients, whereas
somebody else just takes a spoonful and eats it and doesn't think about it.
I think it's sort of how intensely you the sound.
And what does that do to you? So, you know, what's that actually doing to your brain? Does it make you angry?
Irritable?
Irritable? Did you think, I've just got to get out of here, I can't stand this noise?
It often made me irritable, but I think it's this attention, this sort of focusing on one thing. I tend to, if there's lots of noise, particularly if there are lots of different sources of noise, I would sort of focus in on that, and then it'd be hard to...
Well, it is fascinating to hear all about this, because Caroline, I suspect whether it manifests itself in obsessive compulsive disorder or irritability or whatever, lots and lots of people have this in their life and they're not aware of it. Now, those are the problems that Richard has. Can he be treated? Is there a treatment? Is there a cure? What happens?
Well, I mean, there's 500,000 people in the UK who have autism, so there's a lot of people, and Asperger's is a form of autism. So for Richard, you know, very simple things, I think, can make a difference to how he can cope in the world, and, you know, working in a quiet environment, the right kind of lighting and those kind of things. And it's you know, it's great to have Richard here talking about his story, because unfortunately so many people and adults with autism can't actually get employment, can't get engaged because of these difficulties that they have, that really there's so much that can be done. And you know, we've been working really hard to try and raise awareness of the difficulties that adults with autism and Asperger's have.
That, all as Amy said, could be seen as a huge positive that you can
Exactly. There is
harness, you know, as an employer, you say, hey, I'd love to have somebody that's so focused.
Absolutely, and particularly, you know,
concentrate.
I mean, you know, Richard himself works in finance. You know, what a fantastic skill set he's got, that real attention to detail. You know, we know that at work, none of our finances are going to go wrong because Richard's there checking it out.
Well, that's one thing I don't have is Asperger's. I'm useless with money and figures and everything to do with that. But Richard, what is there in your life that you miss, you want, or that you're prevented from having because of your condition? You've done so well, but where is there an emptiness or a void with you?
Well, for a long time, finding friends was a big challenge, and I've been working on that with a sort of a reasonable amount of success recently, and so I think it's just sort of at the age of 24. In some ways, I'm really pleased that I've got a job and building up. I'm hoping to be like a promising career, and I'm very happy with that. But I suppose the fact that a lot of Asperger's people can't relate to other people, so they just don't sort of forge the relationships that they want to, and so that is a big thing for lots of us.
Well, hopefully as well by highlighting it, and we thank you so much for coming on today, because it is about letting people know what this means.
Can I just say, if people are affected by this, that they can call our helpline.
Well, I was just going to say, if anybody's watching and they're thinking, do you know what, my child, they get very upset by noise.
Adults will have this and they're not aware of it.
What should they do?
Well, definitely, if they've got concerns, they can call our helpline, and we can take them through sort of things that might help them, places they can go for more support. We're also running a campaign at the moment called I Exist, raising awareness of the needs of adults that, like with Richard, with the right support can really achieve. But unfortunately, only about 15% of adults are actually in employment, adults with autism, and that's quite a shocking statistic.
That's a disgrace.
So
Richard, you're a great lad. It's been fantastic meeting you, and good luck with everything ahead, and I hope you find the friends that you deserve. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Caroline.
Also,
thank you very much.
Caroline was mentioning there that the information help out there, and we'll have that information about Asperger's syndrome and all the